And Kevin, are we up and live? Okay, great. So welcome to the Village of Port Jefferson's afternoon business meeting, 3:30 on April 18th. We're starting with a work session on the 6-acre park, joined with the committee and the consultant VHB, Board of Trustees, members of the audience. Pass it over to Rebecca, who's the liaison to the park committee. Kelly Devine is the chair. The committee is at the round table in front, and we'll go from there.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out to see this presentation of which is the culmination of the work of your neighbors and fellow community members sitting here before you. The 6-acre park committee came about when the mayor and I were discussing the importance of beautifying the 6 acres of parkland along Highlands Boulevard, which is very near to obviously the Highlands condominium complex, as well as the Long Island Railroad and the other existing and incoming apartment buildings there. The vision of this is to create parkland where folks who live in those apartments who do not have yards of their own per se, as well as the rest of the residents in Port Jefferson Village, can come and enjoy some peaceful bathing in nature, as Kelly likes to say. It's a Japanese concept. And so this is what fueled the project. The 6-acre park committee worked tirelessly over the course of just under a year to research and figure out what type of park project in this location would be enthusiastically received by Port Jefferson Village residents. We spoke to the constables about safety. We spoke to parks about maintenance and many other aspects, and in the end created a proposal that was unanimously adopted by the Board of Trustees in May of 2021. Is that almost a year ago? Wow, time flies. Since then, we've been contracted VHB, will give the presentation today. They conducted a design charrette with members of the 6-acre park committee, as well as village staff and members of the Board of Trustees. And the presentation today is the culmination of all of the committee's work prior, and then which turned into the design charrette work, which now we will see from VHB, and I hope, like myself, you're very excited to see this.
Thank you, Trustee.
Thank you.
Mayor, members of the board, thank you, members of the committee. My name is Andrew Kelly. I'm a landscape architect with VHB Engineering. As Rebecca mentioned, VHB has been tasked to work with the village and the appointed park committee on preparing conceptual design options for a potential 6-acre park parcel located on Highlands Boulevard within the village. With me today is also Lou Bukowski, as well as Maria Olson and Claudia Namaroff. Lou is an environmental planner with VHB, director of environmental planning with VHB, and Maria and Claudia were 2 additional landscape architecture team members that are instrumental to the presentation that we're putting together today.
Andrew, I'm just going to ask you to pivot that mic a little bit closer to you. You can move. It's a gooseneck. Because you got a nice.
Better?
I think so.
Okay.
Only because we're trying to
I
broadcast.
can also
as well.
lean a little closer. Sorry about that. Yeah. So first off, I just want to thank everyone for allowing us to come and present today about this exciting project. To orient everyone, as Trustee Casey mentioned, the park is located north of Highlands Boulevard. I apologize, it's a little small on the screen there, but it's that center wooded area north of Highlands Boulevard, which is also just north of the Long Island Railroad Station, and it's just east of Oakland Avenue, just for orientation. So what we're presenting to you this afternoon, we'd like to walk all of you through our design process that we've completed to date, the program elements developed during our charrette with the park committee, the massing diagrams that we've developed internally to develop the design, and then finally we'd like to present to you 3 concepts that we've put together for the park. They are up on these boards. We just have them flipped so we can kind of go through the process, and then we'll show everyone what we've put together. So just a little bit of our process, and Trustee Casey touched on this a little bit before, but just to kind of go through our design process. So our process started with a comprehensive site walk, which included walking the site's context to get a sense of character and existing site circulation patterns, vegetation, view sheds, etc. We also took time to visit some of the existing nearby parks, inclusive of Texaco Park, to better understand how park space is currently used within the village. From this point, we completed a formal site inventory and analysis, which compiled all of our findings from the site walk, as well as the data obtained from desktop review of public available site data, which allowed for our team to gain an understanding of the existing site opportunities, constraints, and developable areas on site. We then took this inventory and analysis, which was completed prior to our in-person design charrette with the 6 Acre Park Committee that's seated here with us today. Back in early January, the VHB Landscape Architecture team met with the Park Committee to review our inventory analysis and to allow for the group to express their design ideas and intentions for the space. The charrette was an in-person meeting. It was a productive and interactive design collaboration where our team was able to walk away with a global vision for the park space. From the group charrette, the VHB Landscape Architecture team completed our own internal design team charrette with other landscape architects within VHB, where we were able to identify the project design elements from the design charrette. We then took those elements and we were able to organize them into common project elements and sub-elements, which we were then able to create conceptual massing diagrams to start taking a look at the massings of the site. From there, we then moved into our concept design, which I'll show you in a little bit, where we were able to develop 3 overall park concepts, conceptual park concepts for the space. That brings us to obviously where we are today, our presentation today. Oh, whoops, sorry about that, guys. Kind of below that dotted line that's up on the graphic there, that would be the next steps for the project should the board and the village decide to move forward. It would be inclusive of schematic design, design development, construction documentation, and hopefully ultimately project implementation. But we just thought it was important to note those that right now we were just tasked with bringing together a conceptual level design. So a very high level look at what the project elements were and the common goals of the committee and the village for a concept design. So taking a closer look at the project elements obtained from the village charrette, our team worked to organize and more clearly identify the main project elements for the park space. We worked to organize a series of main project elements and sub-elements that would serve as the basis of design through concept protection. The main project elements shown here include, you'll notice we did break it up into kind of main project elements and then sub-elements that kind of fall on the outside of this radius here. So I'm going to speak quickly to the main project elements. A gateway to serve as a main access point to the park that would define a park entrance and provide pedestrian seating and direction. Open program spaces, which would be areas that could include opportunities for public education, pedestrian walkways, lawn areas, shade trees, directional signage, seating, and arboretum spaces, or areas that could include semi-active and passive uses. Parking for potential park users, the potential for parking along Highlands Boulevard would aid in introducing traffic calming measures and the opportunity to incorporate complete street design elements through the incorporation of green infrastructure and pedestrian circulation along Highlands Boulevard. Municipal share parking options are also considered. We're also considered. We talked about vehicular drop-off for the LIRR access to provide access from the nearby train station across Highlands Boulevard, and a formal drop-off for the potential park and LIRR users. There's a incorporation of a transitional area that would be utilized to transition users from the open program spaces to a more natural area with native meadow spaces and arboretum-type uses. Green stormwater management to assist with existing roadway and proposed site drainage by utilizing existing site topography to hopefully limit site impacts and offer sustainable and resilient design measures. Buffer areas to provide screening from existing residential and commercial land uses. This would include fencing and the preservation of existing natural buffers where applicable or required. Security and maintenance access points. And then lastly, access to the existing adjacent medical property, which we will discuss in more detail when we go through the options. The elements shown on this graphic directly correspond to the proposed concepts with their respective letter identification. So when we actually go through the concepts, you'll notice that we've identified each program element with letters, and they're correspondent on each concept that we've prepared. So from identifying these elements, the VHB team progressed the design by taking a look at how these elements would fit on the site and how they integrated into the existing vehicular and pedestrian circulation patterns. So we did that through developing these massing diagrams that you see here. This step is a high-level approach to positioning the project elements on site while taking a look at the relationships between the elements and the existing site context. The conceptual massing of these elements also look into accounting for the opportunities and constraints identified during our inventory and analysis stage, which allowed for us to better situate the elements on the site. We then took these elements, these conceptual massing diagrams, which were a culmination of some of the diagrams that we worked with the committee on to prepare in our group meeting. and we took these to get a sense of how everything lays out on site, and then we progressed it into the actual concept design. So now the fun part, we'll pull up.
Pause here
Yeah, sure.
and talk a little bit about, so these large,
Yeah, so
just talk a little bit more about these 3 or 4 diagrams and without reading from your heart.
yeah. So what we did is we took the elements that we identified with the park committee, and we took them and we started to lay them out, taking a look at large scale areas and where some of these semi-active areas could fit. So you'll see
You want a
some.
pointer?
Thank you. We started to look at incorporating some of the gateway elements along Oakland and Highlands, all right, and then some of the open spaces in the middle. The transitional areas that we talked about, we felt would fit well. There's an area of topography on the site here that would work well as a transition area down to a lower low-lying area for an arboretum space is kind of what we were looking at here. It will allow for the incorporation for a native meadow area to not only introduce native species, but also help stabilize some of the slope that's in that area. So in summary, when we did our inventory analysis, really our developable area was more so in this kind of western portion of the site. We start to pick up that grade kind of down the center of the site where there's a slope down to a lower low-lying area. We started to lay in some of the optional parking that we discussed as a group. And one thing to note on this is that a lot of these concepts, they all kind of follow the thought of the realignment of Highlands Boulevard, which is another project that's really being worked on by the village. So it's kind of instrumental in the development of these concepts. You'll notice that what the point of that realignment was to bring the road a little bit to the northwest and better align with East Oakland Avenue here that was newly improved upon. So it would create a safer 4-way intersection here in this Station Street, sorry, thank you, Mayor, for the realignment of Highlands Boulevard. So what that did was allow us to open up this central corridor area here, which allows to incorporate that gateway and some passive use space, as well as some of the options also show an alley and a tree-lined pedestrian connection route to the rest of the park. So I'll just, if I can bring up the concepts, I'm going to flip these.
Can you talk about
Sure.
so right now, this is Highlands Boulevard, and right now, there is this cut through.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go through that in a little bit. Mayor.
Okay, all right, so
I'll touch on that, yeah,
Great.
because that's the one. So I'm gonna go through all the concepts, and I'll touch on those commonalities, Mayor, and the differences between them.
okay,
And I'll flip through these on the screen as well.
okay.
It's hard to do all of them at once. So that's upside down. Flip this one. So just to orient everyone again, so this is the Long Island Railroad on the bottom of the boards. All right, north is up on all these diagrams. Oakland Avenue is here.
And Andrew, could you, and the lectern is in the way, so can we pull it towards the podium? I mean, Ronnie, can you see up there?
Can I move this? Yeah.
Yeah, you can look at the overhead now too, as well as the boards.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants my sheet, they can come take my sheet. Mark, why don't you pass these? Yeah. Pass one back to Liza and.
Stan, you want to share? If someone else wants one, Stan and I can share.
So to orient everyone, Long Island Railroad again is on the bottom of the board. Highlands is the gray area that loops through. All right, and you can see we've identified the Long Island Railroad down on the bottom there just to get everyone orientation. On the top side of the boards is 100 Highlands. That's the medical office use that's there that exists today. And then obviously to the east and the northeast are the existing residential communities that are to the east side of the site. So we did 3 options. I can only pull one up at a time on the screen, but the 3 options here that we prepared, they obviously worked to incorporate all the project elements that we previously discussed with the park committee and at the charrette. And again, as I mentioned, all 3 of them do take into account the realignment of Highlands Boulevard, right? So that's kind of been instrumental in the layout of this. You'll notice that it tees up with Oakland Avenue, all right, to create that four-way intersection.
Station Street.
Station, I keep saying that, I apologize, Station Street. It also allows for us to incorporate the larger gateway in all three options, as well as a potential for some smaller off-street parking. So in all three options, that's a commonality, all right? All three options also create a drop-off, both vehicular and pedestrian, for not only the Long Island Railroad, but also the potential park space. The three options show a different variation of each. The first option being kind of the most minimalistic, and then the third option is the most grandiose with a really nice formalized center island for traffic calming, as well as vehicular drop-off for both the LIRR as well as the park space. That hand in hand also goes with providing the cross connection across Highlands from the railroad station as a crosswalk across Highlands Boulevard. You'll notice all three options also have on-street parking as parallel parking along Highlands Boulevard, again for any potential park users. As I mentioned previously, that's a great way to also start introducing some traffic calming measures with the incorporation of complete street design elements with street trees and green infrastructure along the roadway. In speaking with some of the other village design consultants, there's been some concerns on drainage along Highlands, so this would be a great way to help incorporate some of that green infrastructure to help deal with some of the, not only the proposed drainage for the park, but also the existing drainage required for along Highlands.
Andrew, could you flip to maybe, yeah, you have one up, so maybe
Yeah, so I'll
flip
see
to
if
maybe
I can
two.
hand through them.
You can see just a different.
Would you mind if you could just give a quick example of an open multi-use space, an active use space, and a passive use space? Like, what would be examples of those so that we can understand the difference between these?
Yeah, sure. So our goals here, and let me speak to, I'll leave two. So if you look, we've listed those program elements here on the side, so you can kind of correlate with them. So in terms of multi-open use space, which would be this larger open area, our thought there is that there'll be an open green space for public use, whether it's just walking. We have a tertiary walking path through here. It's very open, tree-lined, shade tree open area. In terms of the passive use space, if there was an opportunity to host any kind of village activity there, whether it's open yoga classes or workout classes, things like that, where someone would want to come in and use that space and have some light active use there, that would be an option as well. But a majority of the spaces are all open, tree-lined spaces, shade trees, and native plantings for the landscape. Just speaking to Mayor, the connection to 100 Highlands. I can go back. So option 1 and 2 all eliminate. There's an existing vehicular cross connection from 100 Highlands that kind of cuts south and north. It's two-way out to the existing alignment of Highlands Boulevard. So the existing alignment of Highlands is a little bit further north. The first two options propose to eliminate that. It helps to create one nice cohesive connection from Oakland Avenue across into the park through the proposed gateway in both options 1 and 2. It also increases safety. It eliminates the pedestrian vehicular conflict between the park space and that existing vehicular access. The only obviously item with that is it would have to be discussed with that landowner to see if it would be an option. They do have another access off of Oakland that serves that property as well. But option 3 for reference does also identify that connection would remain, just so that everyone can see what that looks like and how it really breaks up the space and creates that conflict between the two types of traffic. I think that pretty much goes through high level the design elements.
So can you talk about the connection between the northern property and the park?
Oh, yes, thank you. So on all three options, we did propose and look at the incorporation of a connection to the existing DPW facility that's north of the site. We thought this would be great for maintenance as well as emergency access. You can see that identified by Jay on all the three concepts. It would be a shared access from the DPW property down to the park parcel. It wouldn't be a formal roadway. It would be more of a, like a structural soil or grass paved type structure that would allow for vehicular access if it was needed for both maintenance and emergency access.
Maintain the park.
To the park space. The transition area that we talked about before on the conceptual massing diagrams is what you see kind of on the east side, again, that goes along similar radius of the three concepts. That would be that slope transitional area with a native meadow to help stabilize the existing soils there, and then an arboretum type space down in the low-lying area.
And Andrew, can I have my pointer back?
Yeah.
He's talking about right here.
Yep.
On all three concept plans, there's a big grading difference between the flat lying area here, and there's like a gully, if you will. So this is a large slope between the two, and we definitely wanted to try and do something in here, I think.
Yep.
And
to that end as well, Mayor, it's just worth noting, so we do look to preserve the existing buffer that's there along the residential communities, and ultimately we'd also like to probably improve on that buffer.
right,
Right now, we're very high level. We don't have an existing tree survey for the property. That would be kind of next steps if this were to move forward into the next design phase, where we would do a complete tree inventory and analysis of the property, identify what's there, what's worth saving, what's invasive, things of that nature.
and all three plans have the sidewalk and a gateway here for walking. I think that's a similarity, correct?
Correct, yes. There's, so if you look actually, I'll go to it here, since we're just talking about circulation. These are the three design options.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. And what we did here is we took the three design options and we tried to identify the types of circulation, both pedestrian and vehicular. So you'll notice in this light blue color, that's our primary pedestrian circulation. So you can see in all three, we maintain that pedestrian connection along Highlands Boulevard on all three. The green is kind of secondary, so secondary cross connection through the site. Which on all the options, when we were on site, we noticed there was a lot of the employees from the neighboring medical uses using the existing sidewalk to walk during lunch hours and things of that nature. So we felt that was important to kind of preserve that connection, possibly even providing a connection up across to Mather Hospital for those staff or people dropping off patients or whatever it was to come through and actually be able to traverse through the park space. We also show tertiary connections, which you can see in blue, which is again through that sloped area, be much more of a natural path through some of those arboretum type spaces on the east side of the site. And then in orange, you can see the vehicular circulation. So again, the Highlands realignment on options 1, 2, and 3. And on 3, again, you can kind of see how that vehicular traffic crosses through the proposed park design. And then lastly, the orange or yellow is that proposed DPW shared access to the DPW lot to the north.
I just want to mention, Pat.
Question, how many entrances and exits will there be along Highland Boulevard to get into the park?
So pedestrian access, there'll be two. There'll be one, currently in these three options, there's two for pedestrian access, one in Oakland and one on Highland, right at the turn of Highlands Boulevard. The turn one would be more of the main gateway where there'd be option for a drop-off and things of that nature if you wanted to have, if the local schools wanted to come in and be able to drop kids off for educational opportunities in the park, they could utilize this drop-off. And then this would be the secondary pedestrian access.
Thank you.
Yep.
Andrew,
Yes.
the blue, are those actual walking paths?
The dark blue?
Yes.
Yes, those would be tertiary walking paths. That would be, again, we haven't looked at materials yet, right? We're still very, very high level, but those would be that tertiary path that could be kind of off the beaten path. It wouldn't be the main connection or route through the park.
And is there any area, I don't see an area for just wildlife.
So this whole area here on the east side would be all native. The whole plant palette, the goal would be to be all native and adaptive, right? We are looking to eliminate a lot of the invasive trees that are there today. When we did the site walk, there were several invasives that we identified. So the goal would be to replace those with native and adaptive shade tree species throughout the open areas to create shaded areas.
It just looks like there's a lot of the dark blue walking areas in that wildlife area. So to me, I don't see it as being really left for wildlife.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the thought there is that they'd be very natural. It wouldn't be a paved path. It would be either, a dirt or a mulch path that would allow you to come through. Very much like any of the other arboretum spaces on the island, like Caleb Smith or Blydenburg State Park, things like that.
Yeah. Or another example might be Avalon Park and Preserve, where they have, just the walking paths through the meadows and the forests there, where park goers can respectfully observe wildlife or, study wildlife formally or informally, but it is a space created for wildlife habitat and, the creation of food for wildlife as well.
And Andrew, we've had interest expressed from Stony Brook University and possibly even the high school for an area where they could do open laboratories.
Yep.
And so would that be more this step down
Yeah,
area?
yeah, all that could live there, and we can even expand on that more if we want to. We can scale some of the open spaces down a bit and kind of grow that native area a bit more if we wanted to. But yeah, that would be one of the intents. Education is one of the big sub-elements. We actually listed education as a sub-element in all the elements, really, because you could kind of fit it in anywhere. You could have a green infrastructure educational area, arboretum education, all that kind of thing.
Is there, I know you keep talking about a drop-off, and you mentioned LIRR. In the next stage, is there intention to meet with the LIRR and give access there? Because right now it's really just an informal.
So we've had meetings with the LIRR. I see the infamous Campani and Schwarting team in the back. We actually designed a crosswalk from the Highlands sidewalk over to, there's actually a stairway that's closed off. And we will approach the Long Island, the LIRR again, the MTA really. And we're actually working with them right now on the parking lot management on our side and also on the south side. And as they clean up that south side lot, hopefully, and we begin to manage the upper lot, hopefully they'll agree to open that up because
that's the access to the bridge that takes
yeah,
to that parking lot. So
exactly, right.
Yeah, so if you see the crosswalk further east, that's the connection directly to that staircase that's closed off.
Correct.
And from the drop off that's kind of right on that radius there, the thought is that we'd have another walking path that would also provide connection across to that.
This is a workshop right now with the committee and the board of trustees first. So hold on to your questions if you could. We have to agree to take in public comment, right? So I want to get the committees. I want to make sure the committee's questions and concerns are all answered.
Andrew, fencing, would you explain about fencing? Because a big concern to me is that we were right next to those Highland condos. Is that a solid, strong fencing with trees?
So we're not at that level yet, or where we're detailing, the details of a fence and the type of fence and the materials. But that is, if you look at the element diagram that we had up, that is an incorporation of part of the buffer material that would be utilized there. It would be fencing as required, based on the final design.
And I had another question about seating because Pox Christi exists there. Weekly, I call code. There's always homeless that's coming from Pox Christi going into the parkland, and seating is a problem. So how is that going to be approached? Because there can't be, first of all, a bench where there's two, that's for sleeping, and even if there's one, that's a problem too. So they would have to be more natural, like a log to sit on or something.
I don't think you guys are at that level yet.
Yeah,
right?
so we're not at that level, but I can speak just a little bit to the security side of things. I mean, obviously, right now in the existing condition, there's no lighting there, right? It's very open. There's places. It's actually not very open, right? There's all the vegetated areas that people are kind of ducking into, and at least from what I saw, it seemed like a lot of that was happening on the east side of the site, where there's that heavy vegetation. So obviously, part of the design would be to incorporate, security lighting as needed to help make it a safer area and help eliminate some of those conditions. So. In terms of the bench specifications, I mean, there's a lot of things we can try to look into in terms of specifications for the type of seating to help eliminate that. But again, we haven't really gotten into that level of detail yet at this stage.
Well, and to address security concerns, because we know that this is, a large concern by, based in the fact that currently and historically you have had people camping or ducking out in this area, looking at other park projects similar to this, where you take a space that is not being utilized, a space that looks neglected, and creating pathways, inviting the public at large to be boots on the ground and sort of be a community watch of this space. It becomes much less appealing for people who are looking to set up camp somewhere, because now suddenly there are people there, as opposed to tall plants that they can sort of duck behind and hide. So it's been proven to projects like this have been proven to greatly increase the safety and security of an area.
I just wanted to tag on to that. In my work with code enforcement, one of the things that is always helpful is when you have spaces that are more cleared versus heavily vegetated. A park like this, because it has the easy walking paths to, an officer could easily walk through to do a patrol check. A drive-by with a line of sight is much better in a condition like any of these three examples versus the tangled, what's there now, where you can only see so far in. So I think that's helpful in the security
And
process.
you guys met, part of your intake was to meet with the Code Bureau on this, so.
And
So
they had
that
mentioned too, I forgot to mention, bike, they have the bicycles as well, that they do bike patrol. And so a code officer could bike through these paths in a couple of minutes and put that on the regular schedule to have those eyes on the ground, as opposed to having to trudge through the mat of invasive species that is currently there.
Gerard.
In the third concept option, where we keep the connection into the medical professional space, that would then allow maybe us to have shared parking so that we could eliminate a lot of the parking along Highland?
That could be an option. Yeah, I think even, it would definitely provide more of that direct pedestrian connection from that lot. I think we could maybe even still make that work if we were to close that off, which we could look at further. But yeah, shared municipal parking was something that we talked about as a group, and it's definitely still, as part of the project elements. So.
Highlands,
I would actually like to see less parking on Highland.
Okay.
So Highlands Boulevard is super wide. It's almost wide enough to be a 4-lane road. So, well, oh wow, you guys have your measuring tapes out. Michael, how wide is Highlands? It's wide.
It's much wider than a 12-foot wide normal.
Right. So let's say 3 lanes. We're getting 2 lanes and parking on both sides on this concept drawing. So all we want to mention is that the realignment of Highlands and some introduction of these elements is going to slow down the cars that are currently zipping through. Kelly.
But could I make a distinction when we're talking about parking on Highland between the on-street parallel parking and this new lot that doesn't exist? It's
Right.
more where it says D. I think it's more the new lot that was something that we were thinking wasn't necessarily going to be there.
Well, so, you're going to have people who want to come to this passive arboretum to enjoy a nice day out walking. Okay. If you don't provide parking, guess where they're going to go? We need to have some parking feature. If we can't get a use agreement here, our parking lot is somewhat underutilized, so that's why we're creating this little gateway here. So just be mindful of that.
What I might like to
I
Sorry.
was basing that on the use agreement, and Mark was.
We had
talking-
discussed the
we had
possible,
discussed
but
it.
we're not there yet.
Right.
Sorry.
And what I might like to suggest in the next step is, because the use isn't there right now, and because Deputy Mayor Snaden, Kevin Wood, and I are part of a little task force internally to look into these user agreements, shared parking agreements with these enormous lots that already exist uptown. So in the interim of this park moving forward, trying to enter those agreements and seeing if additional parking would be necessary, maybe land banking that parking, designing something where it's more of a passive use on if it's grass space or a couple of trees, whatever it is there, and then if in the future it's determined that parking is needed, then having that as an option, sort of in the back pocket of the village, but otherwise just having that be another little island of green space, with the hopes of having success entering agreements with nearby facilities, which again have seas and seas of blacktop.
Kathleen?
Andrew, I'm just gonna go up here. If we could eliminate this and then keep this, this actually keeps an area away from Parks. It kinda, doesn't allow Parks Christie to go use Greenland, right?
Mhm.
And it takes away this parking here, which I'm not an advocate of parking along Highland Boulevard, but, if we need parking, you know,
So I mean, and again, you know, the parking was an option that was discussed. You know, we can, you know, discuss further and work through it when we go through final design.
do we need more than what this is? And then this parking lot, which residents can be in,
It's
this would be residents only?
Kevin, you want to talk to parking?
Well, I have a whole presentation that will kind of, it'll talk about this,
Okay.
and the implications of what's going on up there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think again, if we move forward with the design process, we would obviously work with the village to identify what that parking demand is going to be. And I don't see it being a lot, but I mean, obviously we'd work with the village to work on a number and arrive at something that would work. So.
Well, and I think having multiple options available to us, like Rebecca said, maybe land banking a portion, see what happens. The last thing we want to do is have parking where it's not designated all the way along Highlands Boulevard and maybe even into your parking lots and such. So I think if we can get the shared parking, that's a great step forward, and we're continuing to work on that. But even regardless of getting that, having those options are always good. We can have option A, B, and C depending on the usage, and always be willing to, you know, pivot and change if necessary. If you see a large amount of people wanting to use the park with their vehicles.
And just a little side note on the parallel parking, I touched on a little bit before, but the part that the on-street parking does actually allow for some creative ways to incorporate green infrastructure. You know, by creating those cutouts, we can really create some great capture points and on-street drainage and capture through green infrastructure, which is a good opportunity and a positive to it amongst the negatives that we were just discussing. So.
Andrew, I just want to show you the section that to me is the most vulnerable, homeless-wise, that
Okay.
cannot be seen from anyone that's looking from here or over here. Like, you know, it dips way down in, so I just wouldn't want to create a beautiful place here and then find out, okay, now we have homeless that are staying in a nice section.
Yeah, so that's one of the low-lying areas there, and then there's also a low-lying area on the southeast. So we would have to look at those areas. The thought in the southeast low-lying area is to use the topography to our advantage to help capture, you know, drainage as needed in green infrastructure type structures along those low-lying areas. But that's a good point, Kathleen, in terms of that lower area in the northeast.
It's not so much a problem. We can visit it.
Well, because it's visible, right? Yeah. So going back to the points before about visibility. You know.
Could you
Sure,
talk?
and with the, sorry, with the introduction of paths, obviously, you know, again, a code officer can walk or bike to, say on this option 3, to that sort of large white space, you know, and look down into it because that is a higher elevation. So hopefully, you know, that's increasing visibility.
The only problem is code starts and ends from 2 p.m. at night. That's when this stuff happens. Right. It's during the night. There was a guy sleeping 4 feet from my deck. We woke up and there's a guy that's sleeping 4 feet from our deck.
Deputy Mayor
Because he didn't
Snaden,
get
do you want to
into
speak
Pox-
to
Because he didn't get into Pox Christi.
the Suffolk County Police, how code and Suffolk County work together on non-code hours?
Yes.
Okay, well, I mean, guys, this is a problem that exists now. Whether we make this into a beautiful park or not, this is an issue. So let's. I mean, you're trying to address it. You met as a committee to discuss it, but I mean, we just have to be really sensitive to, you know, what we're dealing with. And I'm sorry that you have to deal with that. I know you come to our meetings and you.
And I can talk to you further about any ongoing issues now, as you know. Andrew, could you speak to Section H, which is the stormwater management, and what that could possibly look like? I know when I spoke to you at one point, we talked about a possible water feature and what that could look like if it was for the stormwater management.
Yeah, so the stormwater management, our initial conceptual thoughts are, again, to utilize the areas along Highlands to capture and convey. through, and again, this would all have to be analyzed through topo and geotech analysis and stuff, but right now the conceptual design thought is to use the edges of highlands to convey the drainage through a series of green infrastructure capture points, and then ultimately daylighting everything into the existing low-lying areas to help limit the impacts, right? Let's utilize the topography that exists there today to our advantage. Those would be, again, incorporation of natural wildlife, native plant species, to help handle that site drainage. In terms of water features, like a formal water feature, I know that was discussed with at the charrettes. There's a number of areas that we could incorporate that into. A couple of the options have, I'll go back here, some central node areas like up by the center there, and where F is on this concept, there's a central node area that would create a really nice focal point from the Oakland pedestrian access straight down through the alley of trees. It would really create a nice focal point for the pedestrians to kind of lead them through the park space. So there's definitely opportunities for that. There are obviously maintenance considerations that go along with incorporation of water features. But we wouldn't necessarily incorporate the stormwater as a formal water feature. Obviously, the green infrastructure would be a feature, but it's not something that would really be a formal water feature.
The water wouldn't always be standing there. It would
Right,
be more
well,
like a
lot of times green
bioswale or.
infrastructure a lot of times is actually designed more to be dry than it is wet in some instances. Again, that depends on the soil conditions, which would all be analyzed. But we would design it to work based on what those percolation rates are,
Okay.
so that it would work well for the site condition.
Got it. Thank you.
And the hope would be to capture the stormwater before it's shunted into the system that brings it downtown, and it contributes to the downtown flooding we see in our commercial and residential areas here at the waterfront. So keeping part of the climate resilience planning is the concept of keeping water where it is, as opposed to streaming down to the downtown.
And I just would like to note that, obviously the goal would be to try to capture as much as we can in green infrastructure, but a lot of times we don't always have the space to capture everything. So sometimes it might just be that first flush that then goes into a conventional but site-located drainage system, like you're used to seeing. But the goal would be to capture most of it if we can.
So there will be watering going on in this park, correct?
So, again, we're conceptual. Our thought process is that some of the more formalized areas would be irrigated, and the more natural areas wouldn't be. Again, I think our plant selection process would be, again, native and adaptive material that hopefully after that third planting season or fourth growing season, I should say, irrigation use would be limited. That's kind of always our goal through design. So.
And what about the deer situation with new trees being planted? Would there be, it's something the deer are there every day?
So we always try to design towards deer tolerance, right? But unfortunately, the deer never read that list, right? So, and if it's a hard winter where there's not a lot of material for them to browse on over the winter months, unfortunately, things get hit. But we would work to try to design towards the best deer tolerance that we could. But that sometimes can be challenging depending on the season. So.
And how tall would the trees? Are we not at this stage either?
We're not, but to give an order of magnitude, like the larger trees that you see here would be all shade tree type urban tolerant species, probably around the 30 to 40 foot height, especially in the more open areas, probably a little bit on the larger side of that. Again, the idea would to have really nice large canopy trees that would provide nice shaded areas for people to utilize these open spaces, but also leave open for sun to come through as well for those uses. So.
And certainly in a lot of the open spaces, we could maybe get sculptures for interest.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great opportunity for local donors and local art establishments to come and place their artwork there, or however the village wants to work with that. But that's another great opportunity.
We have a lot of dedications of trees down at Harborfront Park and the Sawassa Garden Club. I see representatives always put those beautiful cherry trees behind Village Hall, so might be a lot of opportunities there.
And the Biden administration just released, what was it, $1 billion, $100 million, or no, $1,000 million for urban trees. So we could. There's tons of grants to be looking into to potentially fund planting of larger trees here in the park, again, for, so that the deer, they have a running start from the deer, but also, to have these great specimen trees having a running start for enjoyment.
So the whole reason why we got this structure in place with the committee and the design team of VHB is because there is a New York State grant that we are positioning ourselves to make application for. It required us to have at least a concept design so that we can then go and get the grant to help us pay for all the other underlying requirements. Are you going to get to that point, or am I jumping ahead?
I wasn't going to speak in detail about the grant
No,
process.
so I just, so we're just trying to get to that point where we have what we need to make submission, which is by the end of May, I think the deadline, Lou?
I think it was.
End of July. Okay, good. So we're working towards that end, and that would be a 2-phase grant, one to get all of the rest of the planning tools in place, and then the following year is for the money to actually build the park. So, getting a concept is really important so that we can then work towards a lot of these details that we're talking about, types of fencing, types of tree, types of walkway material. Will we have sitting? Will we not have sitting? Those are all things that we leave up to the community and the committee to really give us more guidance on. If there are any, I think, questions with respect to what we're looking at from the general audience that we would like to answer without getting into like design and technique, because that's obviously we have one more task as a committee, right, to put all of these together and to come up with the one concept. I think we'd be open to hearing from the woman in the far back.
About the east side line you have there, that, yes. You said, I think you said that that's an existing natural area, and you're gonna put a fence there on the east side of the park?
Well, I think what we're saying is there is a natural buffer there right now, which I believe we would want to maintain as much of it as possible, but also enhance that.
So that line abuts the Highlands condo.
Correct.
That line is the existing line of the natural area?
Yeah, so this is an actual, this is an actual tax map. The hard line here is the actual property line between the two parcels.
So there will be no natural area behind the condo?
Well, there's the existing vegetation that's there today that we would work to preserve the best we could.
Yeah, that's all.
And
That's represented here.
As the mayor mentioned, supplement that to further enhance it.
I think maybe are you asking is the fence going in front of that natural area or in back of that natural area? So when you look out, are you gonna see the natural area or are you gonna see the fence?
So we don't technically show a fence on this concept, right? This is very high level, but we would, as I mentioned before, we would do a complete tree survey and get a sense of what's there, an existing vegetation of what we can save and not save. And I think that's going to really dictate where that fence would land, depending on and what kind of type of fence it's going to be.
And we're hearing that you may want a fence. If you don't want a fence, that saves us money, right?
Don't want a fence. In other
Well-
words, we won't have access to this area from our condo, correct?
But can I get it clear, make it a little clearer, because I'm very familiar with that whole area.
Sure.
The Highland condos here, right behind, is a big hill,
Yep, there's a berm.
okay? When that hill goes down to the bottom of that hill, then that's the property line. So what happens is, you wouldn't walk back this way anyway, it's going over that big hill.
Yeah, there's a berm there that was probably put in as part of the.
It would be
So
no
that's not
entrance.
like, okay, nobody walks like that. So,
Yes. Sorry, hold on.
a fence is important because we don't want people walking just like, oh, let me go over the hill and go up here, okay? So a fence is very important.
Yeah.
How wide is it, or how many feet from where that ends to the condo? How close are you gonna be?
Well, again, this is a concept where we took out crayons and watercolor, but we can have a survey and show you like actual dimensions from the back of the unit.
And Mayor, these actually,
I mean-
these work somewhat drawn to scale, so
Right.
we can provide, if there's any key dimensions that you need.
Well,
we can give you some
I'm
rough-
just
I
trying to
can't
answer the
pull 'em.
question.
I can't pull
I
'em
can
right now.
show anyone that needs to know that too, from the Highland condos, just get a hold of me.
Liza?
How many acres is this project right here?
The whole park is around 6 acres, the whole
6
park,
acres.
yeah.
So you go from the flat land and it goes down. So you're gonna fill that in and? this
No,
is-
no, 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 we're not looking to fill that area at all. We're
So
looking-
this is the,
It's a big flat area right now.
Yeah,
so this is the flat area, and this is the gully.
Right.
There is some slope that goes north of the site. I mean, there would be some earthwork to kind of create these spaces, but the goal is to not make it one flat piece of property all the way across. That would not be the goal.
No, we can't. It's physically impossible.
And no one will see the fence, actually.
Liza?
See the fence?
Guys, this is not a two-way conversation. Liza? It's okay.
About, what would be the best way, so my understanding is that there's another meeting coming up that's like, we can provide some feedback or comments or something. Is
The
that
first of the
correct?
month, first of the month.
So what's the best format for doing that? That you just come, or is there a means for us to provide some written comment?
Yeah, you can either come and speak narratively, or you can mark up your document and bring it back. Can Kelly Devine is the chair of the committee? Can chat with Kelly, or?
The other, just along those lines, question I had is, I saw the summarized set of, like, values or principles for the
Yeah.
park, I forgot what we call them. Is there a more detailed version that you can share with us, so that we'll understand if the things we're interested in ensuring our priorities have been represented already, or not? That would help.
Okay, so
I think, yeah, I mean, this, again, I apologize, it's a little hard to read on the screen, but I can
so you have
share-
you have two members of the Highlands on this of this committee. So the goal was for the Highlands of this 5-person committee to have a very strong voice. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
We can share this digitally, Mayor, if you
I think
want,
that
so that
yeah, that's
people can
fine.
see it- So that people can see it a
Absolutely.
little bit better. I know some of the sub-elements that may be addressing some of the items.
I think
we
it's in.
wanna
You
see
have.
here.
Do you have a packet? Do you have the big sheet? It's in there.
I was just wondering, so like, for example, if I'm concerned about the security lighting, because that's my backyard, right? So if there's a whole bunch of security lighting as opposed to it being dark now, and also.
We're not.
parking-
Yeah, we haven't even gotten to lighting.
Right, so I just wanna know if that comment has already been received, I wanna know that you.
So
already know that.
we would obviously design with the surrounding land. use
Liza, it's right here.
and-
Security and maintenance, lighting, open view, vehicle barriers, DPW access. So those are all things that were discussed on like an intake level. Sorry, Andrew, I didn't
No,
mean
that's
to
okay.
interrupt
That's
you.
all right. And then we would,
Down lighting.
and all that,
Well,
Dark sky, what they call dark sky compliance.
Andrew, I'm going to let Andrew address that point, then I'm going to go to Grace behind
And-
Liza.
and again, just to kind of finish my comment or response to that, we would obviously design with the neighboring land uses in mind, right? We're not gonna put, parking lot style lighting right next to a residential community, right? We would look at that design aspect, spec fixtures that are, I overheard, dark sky compliant. We always use dark sky compliant fixtures. And there'd also be a complete photometric analysis done. Luckily, the topo is gonna help us a little bit, topography is gonna help you. And we can do sightline diagrams through there so you can get a sense of where your house is in relation to the proposed park and things of that nature. So that would all be, if we move forward through design, that would be what we would look to study through the design.
And people, this is going to be a very expensive park, so we need to get help to build it, right? I mean, I'm going to go to Grace first, and I'll come back to you, Fred.
On parking, how are we going to guarantee that this will not be turned into commuter parking?
Well, Mr. Wood is going to be giving a presentation next about managed parking in the LIRR. It could be timed 2-hour parking or 1-hour parking, or we can figure out a way to manage like we do in the other parking lots.
Okay.
Fred? Oh, sorry.
Also, I just had a comment to make on seating. One of my thoughts in having this kind of a park is it should be a place where seniors who are not terribly ambulatory might be able to come and sit while maybe their wives walk around or vice versa.
Excellent point.
And we have discussed that.
Yeah. Fred, and then I'll go to Michael.
Marco, since I presently pick up most of the garbage.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. I know that.
How are you going to maintain the garbage situation in this park?
Okay, so the committee met with the Parks Department, and we know that there is going to be just same way we do at a Harborfront Park. I mean, it's pretty well managed. It's not a mess down there. It got it to be a mess during COVID, but it'll be a 2 parks crew assigned there, emptying the garbage first thing in the morning and maintaining it. So we're not trying to put more workload on you, Fred. That's for sure. Yeah, we know we're expanding our park footprint. That means more resources. So we've met with the Parks Department, and Dave said he would need about 5 assistants to get this done. No, I'm kidding. I don't know. He was Michael?
Yeah, I just wanted to say there's a grove of trees near Oakland, about a dozen fairly mature trees that go right about where your gateway to the west is, and it seems that those are
To the west.
reasonable trees to try to save as many of those as possible.
All right, you mean in here, right, Michael? Yeah.
Yeah.
The other is that if there is to be a connection to the Long Island Railroad, it's about a 5-foot high climb.
Yeah.
To it. And there's a kind of natural ramp that
Right.
would probably serve ADA and end up right near the gateway.
It's kind of like over here, right,
It's
Michael?
right-
Somewhere?
Now it's a little further to the right, but
It's not this. It's a little somewhere here.
Yeah, it's-
Right.
yeah, it's in
So
between the
that
2
would
crosswalks.
make a good connection to the.
Yep. Yep, that's right. There's an existing wall there, and there's almost like a cow path that's been formed from people walking. So that's exactly where we're looking to make that connection. Thankfully,
And-
people kind of showed us where they want to walk there. So
And I know that you designed something. What was it, 6, 7 years ago, Michael, when we met with the MTA? So this might be another reason to get them to agree. I'm sorry, Mark. Mark.
It seems to me, as I observed when over at the highway department, that we need a barrier perhaps near the highland, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a fence. Given the change of the ground level, I was wondering if a tall box hedge could be used the same way that a fence could be used. Maybe it'd be more difficult to scale and perhaps be more natural, as well as holding the earth more by the incline and being more stabilizing.
that is an option. Yep.
Yeah, we had, the committee had also brought up hollies, which are even tougher to walk by because no one likes to squeeze through some holly trees or bushes.
Yeah, that's another great option to create that barrier. Yeah.
All right, well, I think this was a very productive opportunity. The committee and the board are charged with, what's our next steps, Andrew?
Next steps is to come up with one option. So obviously there's a lot of elements and different design nuances in the 3 of these, where we can either, if you like the parking in one, or you like the open space in one, we can take that and blend it with 2, or vice versa.
So we're doing a mashup.
Yeah, so the goal would be to take a mashup of these 3 and arrive at one common concept, one agreeable common concept, and then we would obviously move forward from that point.
Okay.
So is the homework of the committee to mark up on their sheets and maybe scan or
Yeah.
Yeah,
photograph
that might
and
be,
send them
you
in?
guys want to meet and
Yeah,
back.
I think that would be a good recommendation.
Yeah.
And we can go from there. You know, if there's certain elements in 1 or 2 or 3 that you like better than the other, and we can blend something together.
Very good. And one of our committee members, Brian Smith, was unable to be here due to work conflict, but thanks to Kevin Smith, Kevin Wood, for recording and making this available both to our public at large and one of the 6 Acre Park committee members to be able to listen to this conversation, and we'll make sure he gets one of these packets. I'd love to recognize formally the 6 Acre Park Committee. Again, these are neighbors, community members that share and love Port Jefferson as everyone in this room and everyone in the village does. They've taken tons of time and energy over the past year to get the concept plans to this point. Obviously, all of the concerns that everyone has shared today are valid and going to be looked into as the plan continues to crystallize and become something shovel-ready. But concerns aside, I hope that your fellow community members can appreciate the hard work and dedication of we have Chair Kelly Devine, Mark Brosnan, Gerard Gang, Kathleen Riley, and Brian Smith. I thank you so much.
Rebecca, do you guys have a page on the website? Okay, so can we get this up on the website and maybe Kelly's contact information or somebody who might be able to if anybody else wants to submit comments as a result of this, or, because we're going to take that last mashup and we're going to come back to the public and get, a final round of public input. So,
Is there
to
an
be continued.
email address specifically for this committee? Does anyone know, or should we
No.
start one?
Yeah, starting one
Yeah.
would be fantastic. And
I was like,
previously,
I'm
during
not sure
during this
about-
during this whole process, I've been collecting public comment. We have an ongoing public comment document, which I'll share with whoever's going to manage that email address, to just continue putting public comment in. Any email that comes in, as long as it's regarding the park, has been added to this list, and so there are dozens of public comments that have come in. And again, the door is always open, so please send your thoughts, your concerns, the things you're most excited about. Gosh, we love those. And any other thoughts on the park as this exciting project
And
continues.
just to really accent, we haven't made a decision about anything that's being planted here. So there's still time. We're going to obviously seek guidance from, our partners at the Sawassa Garden Club and other people who have great recommendations about the best native plantings to be put here. Kathleen.
I want to thank VHB and Andrew and the team, because you've created something that is for everyone. And that's what I really like, that we have, over 8,000 village residents and visitors. And this is something I think that the village would be very proud of.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, great job. Great job with the design team. Thank you, ladies in the back. Lou, for bringing this to our attention, that the granting opportunity, and we're looking forward to continuing working with you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
So Kevin Wood is going to be giving a presentation on parking to the Board of Trustees. The rest of you are welcome to, sit here and listen, but we're